Hello, everybody. This is a live workshop where we will be looking at the GitLab Handbook and specifically looking at how we can help you identify what issues you might be having when your pipeline is failing. Um, a lot of people feel quite frustrated when when their pipelines fail. So I hope we can get something positive out of this session. I'm going to share my screen because I've got a little presentation that goes with this. Right. So when your pipeline fails, we've all had this feeling of being frustrated. All you did was make a small update and the pipeline fails, and it's sometimes quite tricky to figure out what went wrong. To start off, I want to just quickly go over how the GitLab Handbook pipelines work. And for those that don't know, a pipeline in GitLab is essentially a bunch of jobs that get executed in a specific sequence. The GitLab Handbook one has two sequences, one for merge requests and one for when code lands on master. And essentially, a pipeline is broken down into various stages. For the GitLab Handbook, we can see there's a build stage, a test stage, and a deploy stage. And inside of it, it has various jobs. So for instance, in the build stage, there's a build branch job. In test, there's checklinks, linting, and so forth. And so, just get there. So that's essentially what we'll be looking at is these pipelines and more specifically the jobs, because when the pipeline fails, it's due to a job that fails. Right. Then when we look at master, we have a similar structure, except we're not deploying a review app, we're actually deploying to production, and it has a few different jobs that it runs. But essentially, it's the same principle, just different jobs that get executed. So I previously did a quick recording of how to find out why a job is failing. And I've added the YouTube link here, but I'm going to do a live demo today as well on a different issue. So I've started with a example MR. Just go back there, and I'm going to open it up and show you what is going on there. So I opened this MR, and it's got a simple change of adding a new person to the team.yaml file. And at first, kind of like glance, this all looks fine. However, if I have a look here, I can see, it says the merge result pipeline failed. And I see a bunch of red dots, and it's definitely not looking great. So if you go to the pipelines tab, if you click on one of these, you can see the jobs for this specific stage. And I can see all of these are failing. So there's definitely something not right. And also, I can see some on the test stage that are failing as well. So first thing you want to do is go and look at one of these jobs that are failing. And what you'll see here is the output from the job. Now, a lot of the time, people are overwhelmed by what they see here because it doesn't make sense. The key to reading these is to look for the part that gives you actionable information. If we just look at the output here, these are just a bunch of file paths and referencing specific methods that are being called. Now, in technical terms, this is called a stack trace, and this might be useful for debugging the issue at a more technical level, but for the purposes of figuring out what went wrong, this isn't that useful. So what you want to do is you want to kind of like scroll up and see where things start going wrong. So everything looks fine here. And then we get to a point where it says YAML exception parsing does not find expected key at line 2587 column 3. So it's definitely, it's reading the YAML file and it's saying, you know, something is wrong there. So that gives us an indication. If we look at some of the other jobs, we'll likely find a similar, so here we can see, you know, it's not finding something that it's expecting. If we go, however, back to our pipeline, and we look at some of the other failed jobs, because we have multiples on these, and we go and look at the linting one, maybe we can find some more information of what's going on here. Again, scroll up, look for where things start going on, and it says bad indentation of a mapping entry at line 2588A. So that immediately gives us more actionable information of what's going on. Now, YAML files, as I'll get to a little bit later, are notorious for requiring specific structure and indentation. So it's very important to do that. So what I'm going to do, just for the sake of this demo, is I'm quickly going to edit this file. And I'm going to go right to the bottom where our thing is. And if we look at line 288, we can see, oops, there's an extra indentation there. So that's something that was wrong that we needed to fix. With that being fixed now, let's just call it fix indentation. I'm going to commit this change, and I'm going to let the pipeline run again. And see if it's more if it's happy now. So while this pipeline runs, you can see it will start a new pipeline now. Yeah, there it's going. So while this runs, I'm quickly going to switch back to the presentation and carry on with a few slides, and then we'll come back to this. So common reasons for pipelines failing. One of the problems are your pipeline won't run because there's a conflict between your branch and master. Now, a conflict is essentially saying that you've changed something in a file and somebody else has changed that file in a similar place where you've changed it, and now Git doesn't know which version is the correct one, and so it requires you to resolve it. So the solution to having this issue is to resolve the conflicts. Now, thankfully, GitLab has a built-in conflict resolution UI, and you can read more about that in the documentations here. I'll quickly list it. But you can basically, it'll show you the differences in between the source branch the target branch that you want to merge it and your changes. And it's up to you to determine what is the right version of the changes. Please be careful, you'll not to leave loose demarcation lines that show you where the errors are in your file once you've cleaned it up, especially if you edit it inline. The interactive mode allows you to choose kind of like which side of the equation is the right one. But if you need to go more granular and you need to edit in line, then make sure you don't leave these demarcation lines. Okay, then another problem is when your branch is far behind master and newer commits in master fixed an issue potentially. So we recently had an issue like this, and quickly go to it, where a change happened in the configuration file for the GitLab CI, and people getting these YAML invalid error messages on their pipelines, and so we fixed it in master, but because their branches weren't updated with the latest fix, they were still getting these errors as they even though they're adding new changes to it. This solution here is to merging the latest changes from master or to rebase your changes onto master. Now, this is potentially a technical area, and I'm not going to go into rebasing in this specific workshop, but we can cover that at another point if it's needed. One of the things that I would highlight is look out for how far behind your branch might be in terms of the number of commits to master. There is many changes going into master every day, and you can very quickly get left behind. So you want to stay up to date with the latest version of master if you have a merge request that is open for a long period of time. Another common reason for errors is changes to team.yaml or any other data file, like we've just seen. And it could be a formatting issue, like we saw with the project indentation value there, or it could be a validation constraint issue. A tool that I can recommend is YAML Validator. So if you have some YAML that you're not sure if it's valid, you can paste it in here, you can click validate, and it can tell you where there's a problem. So if you're writing some YAML code and you're not sure whether it's correct, this is a quick way to check it, especially if you're getting an error message from the pipeline and you're not sure what the actual problem is. It might be easier to just validate it to like this. But most of the time you should receive, especially for the validation constraints, you'll receive a human readable sentence in the job output that shows you what went wrong. For instance, in this example here, it's telling me that I could not find an expected colon when scanning the key at a specific line and column. So YAML files are notorious, for needing exact formatting and indentation. And then in addition to that, we have a lot of validation constraints around the actual values that you put into those data files. Another problem is if you add a new folder to the root of the website. So that would be in the source folder in this repo. We restrict this by using a files file in the project repo. And so if there's an intentional change where you want another top level directory for the project, you need to update this file to show that it's expected to be there. This is more just a safeguard for people accidentally adding things that aren't intentional. Another one is sometimes there's another problem, either with GitLab, a third-party service, or with the underlying infrastructure used to run the pipelines. For instance, in the example I'm showing here, it says HTTP request to update a snippet failed with the status code 503. And that means there's nothing wrong with the code that you're actually trying to merge in, but when the pipeline is running, it's trying to connect to something and it is not having any luck. So the solution here is sometimes retrying the job or the pipeline will resolve that problem for you. Otherwise, to report the problem if it persists. And we'll talk about ways of reporting it. Before we go on with the slides, I want to go back to our merge request and see how that pipeline is going now. Let's close this one down. That one we can close. Right. So here we can see it's finished running the pipeline, but it's still not happy. We're still getting failures, and our linting is still not working. So let's go into this and see what's going on. So again, let's go to where it says, oh, oops, it seems like one or multiple pictures referenced on the team page do not exist. And it's saying this get an empty JPEG. Check that the picture line indented matches the file name of where we placed it. So this is one of those validation constraints that we put in the project to make sure that, for instance, when you reference your team page image, that it actually exists in the project. And so if we just look at the merge request, we'll see that this was a total fictitious example that I made. But there's a lot of errors in this specific entry that will be picked up by the validation. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of the validation constraints in the live demo, but I'll quickly mention it. We look at the type. For instance, it should be person or vacancy. Here, there's a little typo, so it would have picked up an error on that. So we look at the locality. We've got a list of localities that we validate against. We validate against the roles to make sure that there's a job family. We validate the reports to, so this value should actually match another team member's slug. In this case, it's not matching my slug correctly, so that would have resulted in an error. It validates whether the picture exists. And so that's why I threw that error that we just saw. And there's various other validations that it also looks for. So, but the key thing is go into the job where it's failing and look for the first point where you can find, like, this makes no sense, and it's not 99%. It's not going to give you any information, but go to the point where things look like it start going wrong, and we can see here it's going wrong, and we can see there are reports to entries for Jean, but nobody is assigned to those roles. So that's one that I just pointed out. So key thing is go into the job, ignore the stack trace, find the first point where you can see some UML readable error message, and that will normally give you a good indication of what went wrong. Right, so let's move on here. So if you still don't know what is wrong or how to fix it, you might ask, where can I get help with a failing pipeline? And the solution to this is merge request buddies. You can follow this link to the handbook where it talks about merge request buddies and also how you can sign up to be a buddy. But in general, what you want to do is you want to reach out in the MR Buddies Slack channel, or you can go to the team page and search for merge request buddy, and it will show you team members who have indicated that they are merge request buddies and are happy to help people with merge requests. So those are the two ways that you can identify who can help you. But like I said, your default should probably be go to the Slack channel. There's a whole bunch of GitLab team members that are monitoring that and happy to help anybody with troubles. If you have an urgent problem, however, something that can't wait, a critical blog post, something that is very wrong, like the website is not visible after a deploy, which we recently had, or anything that is serious, you should consider escalating the problem to the handbook on-call. We have a process for that, which you can find in our handbook here, and I'll quickly go through to that page. But essentially, it tells you when you should be escalating an issue, and it tells you where you can go. So in the handbook, we have a handbook escalation channel where you can go and reach out for help if it's one of these urgent scenarios. We also have a master broken GitLab channel, which tells us whenever there's a master pipeline that failed, we get notified about that, and we proactively go and look to see what is wrong. So that's another way we monitor what could potentially be going wrong. Right. So hopefully you feel a little bit more confident in handling MR pipeline failures in the future. As a recap, click through to the job that failed. Try and find the error message. Sometimes it won't make sense, and that is okay. You don't have to resolve all issues yourself. There are people who are willing to assist. And when it comes to technical matters like rebasing, if you're not comfortable doing that yourself yet, feel free to reach out to the MR buddies. They're always happy to help. Any questions? Beverly, you've got a question written down in the doc.
I do. It was just about resources where we can get used to the terminology. So like we had that merge request that you assisted me with this morning, and that was just like, what does lint mean?
Yes.
That sort of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is create a self-help page in the handbook that has a lot of these common failure scenarios documented and what you should be doing. And I can definitely take a stab at helping with some terminology. You know, we're also looking to document out what each of those jobs in our GitLab Handbook pipeline does. And so we can definitely make that more accessible for team members to have an understanding of what's going on. But linting essentially is, and from a code point of view, is this is similar to how you would go and you would pull little fluffies off a jacket or jersey, and
Okay.
you know, so what it does is, from a code point of view, is it goes and it looks for specific things that you would expect that might go wrong. For instance, it could look at things like indentation of a YAML file. It could look at things like using correct values, and so it's automating things that a human would have to validate to see if it's correct. So that's something that that we use in software projects.
Cool. Thank
But
you.
yes, definitely we can put some guidelines around the various terminology, pipeline stages, jobs, and those things to make it more clear for team members.
Because we obviously use GitLab a lot within my team. And we're just finding like all of these queries are being routed to one specific person. So I think if we could be a bit more enabled to figure it out ourselves, it would lighten the load for her, most certainly. So this was super informative. Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate it.
Cool. Right, if there's no further questions, then we can end this workshop. Like I said, I will add this recording on GitLab Unfiltered, and I will also work on updating the handbook with documentation around terminology, like you just mentioned, as well as these common error scenarios so that team members can help themselves. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.